Good afternoon. My name is Mary Foster Conklin, and I thank Gail for inviting me back to the latest edition of Alternative Venues for Jazz. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. It is March 1st, which is the beginning of Women's History Month, and that is perfect timing for me. I am both a vocalist and a radio host, and I've been hosting a radio show that highlights women lyricists and composers at WFDU at the Fairleigh Dickinson University campus in Teaneck, New Jersey since 2016. I have done radio since I was in college, and I had been sort of on and off getting back into it through my good friend David Kenny at WBAI. And what happened in 2015 was International Women's Day, I think, was like March 8th or something. And BAI is a very political station. And my friend got locked out of his show because they said that day they would not allow any non-women to operate the station. And he didn't want to lose his slot, so he volunteered me to do his show. And I had 3 days to come up with something. And that was the first rendition of what is now called A Broad Spectrum, the Ladies of Jazz. And I started the first show at WFDU at the end of February in 2016. And it has been going strong and has become a real passion of mine to and also, I mean, when I started, I was just trying to do a a niche jazz show, just so it wasn't just, you know, I don't think there is such a thing as generic jazz, but I wanted a specialty, and it had been something that, as a vocalist, I had done evenings of women writers and composers, and it would just seem like a no-brainer. But that was simpler times, Hillary Clinton was candidate, and the future was a little more. The shit was, and I call it innocent times. And then we got a new president, and the world was very different. And all of a sudden, what was happening, everything became much more political. And all of a sudden, I found myself on a bus going to Washington to march. And suddenly, just because I was sitting there playing music written by women, it was a statement. And I'm very glad to. And then the Me Too thing hit, and it was just everything hit. And it's been very important for me and a real education to sort of return to what I would call my roots in doing this radio show. What I mean by that was I came to New York to do theater and was a singer, but not like a Broadway singer. I think my first professional gig was at a punk club in the East Village called 8BC. And I was subbing for a friend of mine in a garage band from Connecticut, and was just beginning to start edging into doing club work. And but I was kind of at a loss because I wasn't a pure anything. And what happened was there was a great record store on 12th 13th Street, I think, called the Footlights Record Store. They sold CDs and vinyl and cassettes because I'm old. And there was a terrific collection of vinyl albums on a label called Rosetta. The Rosetta series, it was run by a woman named Rosetta Reitz. And she specialized in women artists, women composers. And through the Rosetta series, I was introduced to pianists like Lil Green and Lil Hardin Armstrong, horn players like Vi Red and Valida Snow. It kind of opened up my perspective, Bessie Smith, Ma Rainey, Alberta Hunter, Lovey Austin, Mary Lou Williams. And that coupled with a book that I found in the library, which I actually have a copy of, called The Book of the Blues by, I don't know, it was edited by Kay Shirley and annotated by Frank Driggs, but it's a great book. Oh, no, I know where I inherited this book. I found it in the library, but I inherited it from another jazz lover whose mother had died, and she had it. But it was a great book because it had music and discography. And as a budding music nerd, to be able to trace, say, Lil Green's big hit In the Dark and see who recorded it, and finding out that Peggy Lee had a big role as far as introducing some of the early women writers to the big bands like Glenn Miller, writers like Irene Higginbotham, who occasionally would publish under a male pseudonym because women just were not taken that seriously. I've had these books forever, but going back to them as I program my show has been sort of like being reunited with old friends. And as I continued with the show, the structure of it is pretty much new releases, birthday shout outs, whenever there is some history to share. I like to do that. Like last week was the birthday of Nina Simone, Ida Cox, Nancy Wilson, and with eyes to the present, Grammy winners. It was, as I said to Gail, it was a very good year for jazz and a better year for women. As a NARAS voter, it has been shocking to me how underrepresented in the jazz categories women composers, big band leaders, and instrumentalists. They don't end up in the final categories. And but this year was very good, and part of it was, the great Terry Lynn Carrington, who put out this great album called New Standards Volume 1. And it's a great album, and she followed it up with a book of 101 lead sheets written by women. And if she had not won in the instrumental category, I would have been really, really mad. But it's a great album to look at, and it's also a great book to peruse. The biggest challenge I've had with broad spectrum sort of evenings that I've done is, the challenge whenever it's an educational kind of a program of how to serve it up so it's not like spinach. Like, here's a Great American Songbook, it's good for you. Here are women writers, they're good for you. As opposed to, this is great music and needs to be, there should be more of it. I mean, part of the reason why I do a radio show is, where do I listen to the radio a lot? When I'm driving. And I spend time down in North Carolina. I spend a lot of time driving because it's the northeast corner, the very rural part of North Carolina. And they have a great jazz station in Norfolk, Virginia. But there was one day, it's been a while, but I think it was 2 years ago, I was aware. I was driving in my car. The radio was on for an hour and a half. I'm listening to a jazz show that I love. And, but I was a lot more hip to what was being played. And I realized within that hour and a half, there was one vocalist, Ella Fitzgerald, one woman composer, Kate Dunton from the West. And I was just like, come on, do better. This is not good. I'm happy to report that, and I don't, my show isn't just women doing women. I really look for what I call honorable men who include women writers in their recordings. I just played Ed Cherry's latest recording. He had the very good taste to include Carla Blaze Lawns. Nicholas Payton's Couch Sessions has Jerry Allen represented. Um, I part of the challenge of starting a broad spectrum was really doing a tally of Great American Songbook and finding out, how much of the Great American Songbook is written by women beyond Dorothy Fields, Carolyn Lee. Um, you get into a little more obscure like Dana Suisse, you get into Kay Swift, you get into Irene Higginbotham, Alberta Hunter, Lovey Austin, Mary Lou Williams, and Doris Tauber. I just did a gig, and Doris Tauber's best known for two standards: "Them Their Eyes," which was written in the 30s, and "Drinkin' Again," which was a hit in the 60s, written with Johnny Mercer. And Doris Tauber, not a lot is known about her. I found a biography written by her son, who did an exhaustive discography, and he's not a writer, but asking a lot of questions of she had a huge output of music, but why only two hits? And the question is, why indeed? So hopefully that is changing. There are a lot more women represented in bands. I mean, the best thing about the Grammys this year, as I'm pulling out playlists, was Stephen Feifke and Bjorn Watson and the Generation Gap Jazz Orchestra, which just won the Grammy. Half of that band is women. Alexa Tarantino, Roxy Koss, Lauren Sevy, and Jennifer Wharton. This makes me very happy. So, unfortunately, that's what floats my boat. And, I love, all the jazz DJs in March are like, it's Women's History Month. And I go, that's great. But, every month should be Women's History Month. It's what they call programming with intent. And, if you don't have a lot of women writers in your lineup, you should look at that. Just as with the artists that are wondering whether or not to join NARAS, I can remember Maria Schneider gathered the jazz community together and said, this is an organization that can work for jazz, but you have to get involved. And I remember somebody who had put out a very fine album in the last couple of years who suddenly said on Twitter, why should I join NARAS? And I wrote her back and just said, well, there's very little representation of women instrumentalists. Maybe if you joined NARAS, you could change that. So I don't know. I don't think there is any one organization that is going to do it as far as bringing more, representation, but using facilities that are right in front of you certainly can't hurt. I did an interview recently because I have a new release that just dropped, and the radio guy was going on and on about how it's a wonderful time for jazz and the rebirth of jazz. And the problem with that is jazz is a pretty wide umbrella these days. And when you're talking about jazz, what are you talking about? Can you lump, trad jazz and Ornette Coleman under the same umbrella? And yet that is both jazz. Some of the more out of the box writers, I have radio listeners that tune in to hear vocal jazz and Great American Songbook. And the minute I put on something a little more left of center, I get flack. And the best thing I can do is just, sort of gently remind my listener to wait. If you don't like what you hear, wait till the next song. So anyway, I guess I should talk a little bit about practicing what I preach. I just released a new album, and this is it, called These Precious Days. And it really, I would like to say, it's not my broad spectrum product. But it was 2/3 of the songs on it are written by women. My skill set seems to be reaching for more underdone standards because as a radio person, everybody's got their list of 25 songs that are done to death. And you shouldn't do that um, because you're also up against the best. You have to remember that songs that are, if you want to do a standard done to death, that's perfectly fine, but you'd better make it your own. A very good example of that, I have to say, is Samara Joy, who just won the Grammy in two categories, Best New Artist and Jazz Vocal Album. And she included a standard written by a woman, Guess Who I Saw Today, um, and just performed it on The Tonight Show. It's a very risky thing to do because the singer that really is best known for that song is Nancy Wilson. The fortunate thing is about Samara Joy is she is her own artist. She has a very different voice, very different quality. She can sell a lyric, she can tell a story, and I don't mind collecting. I like playing living artists, not just honoring icons. And it was very, very exciting to hear a fresh take on an old standard that had been immortalized by a well-known singer, and she made it her own. This was just a big thrill and very exciting. And but they're also on the album that I made. I'm been a big fan of the women writers of the Brill Building, and also of Motown. Suze Green and Cynthia Weil, and I did Just a Little Lovin' and Coming from the Rain, which is Carol Bayer Sager and Melissa Manchester, comes a little later. I'm a big fan of Dory Previn as a lyricist, and she wrote some great tunes with Andre Previn and beyond, and I include Just for Now. Um, I think the one I'm most proud of is an Abbey Lincoln tune with a melody by Melba Liston, which I don't think has been done besides Abby herself, and that is Rainbow. And I also do Buffy St. Marie. So what the reason why I mention these things is that beyond Great American Songbook, I think for singers and instrumentalists, I'm as a DJ fascinated by those artists that dip into the pop folios. Pop is a challenge because it's not necessarily as well constructed as Great American Songbook or even Brill Building. The best thing about the standards is how well constructed they are, which means you can deconstruct them and they survive. In pop, sometimes you have to give certain pop tunes a backbone musically, but I think that's part of the challenge. I know that as a radio person, I always go, surprise me, please surprise me with your arrangement, surprise me with your interpretation. I just one of the things also I think that has encouraged my real passion for more obscure Great American Songbook stuff was I did a project maybe 10, 15 years ago, which was an album called Blues for Breakfast, remembering Matt Dennis. Matt Dennis is the guy who wrote Angel Eyes and Violets for Your Furs. And I got into Matt Dennis because I had gotten hooked on his live recording. Matt Dennis plays Matt Dennis, and I was looking for a lead sheet and call for something more obscure that he had done. And I called one of his publishers, and I got some woman on the phone that actually said to me, if Sinatra didn't record it, why should we have it on file? This is really serious stuff. And it threw me into the wild world of, chasing down people with music collections. And this is where I applaud people like Michael Feinstein, who has made it part of his work to chase down these private collectors, and as they leave the planet, rescue their collections, because sheet music is becoming so much ephemera and is in danger of getting lost. My I just discovered a woman from Chicago named Christy Bennett who did a deep dive into the music of Irene Higginbotham, went to the Library of Congress, went down, chased down her archives, and put together a wonderful collection of Irene Higginbotham tunes that go so far beyond the ones that are known, like That Did It Marie and Good Morning Heartache. And to me, yeah, really. To me, it does it, the problem with these projects is that they will most likely be your least selling project. I'm playing this week is the birthday of Rosanna Vitro, and Rosanna Vitro does many concept albums, and she did a great Claire Fisher tribute a couple of years ago, right on the heels of her Grammy nominated Randy Newman project. The Claire Fisher project, I saw her at the APAP with, with her Claire Fisher project, and half the people she spoke to said, "Who's she?" Which is a little scary. So it's, but for anybody who has a passion, on the other hand, you have people like Billy Childs, God bless him, who did such an amazing Laura Nyro project, or Herbie Hancock, God bless him, who did a deep dive into Joni Mitchell and with Wayne Shorter and some of the best singers on the planet. I mean, and Joni Mitchell has finally won the Gershwin Prize in for pop writing 10 years after Carole King. So all of this is, part of what floats my boat as a vocalist, as a DJ. Standards are always good because they're so good. But I'm very interested in original writing. I'm very interested in jazz treatments of pop because that's our world. That's our language. Those are the songs that we have emotional attachments to. And that's why our audiences like songs. You just, sometimes you can't even explain it. It's not like how a song is constructed or the poetry. People just go, "Oh, I love that song. That was my wedding song. That was my dad's favorite song." I find it interesting with young DJs because they were raised much more on Motown. They were raised much more on funk. And, a lot of it depends on what their parents liked. And, which was not necessarily big band and bebop and Great American Songbook. So, what else can I say? What am I working on? The thing that made these precious days so much fun was because it was the pandemic. And as a DJ, I have received a lot of what I call pandemic projects. Projects that came from a deeper place, a personal place, because of the isolation of the pandemic, and for many of us, the losses of the pandemic. My dad had died at the end of 2018. I was taking care of my mom. My mom passed away a month after the shutdown. And my husband got COVID in March of 2020, which was a very different COVID than what we have today. And so my experience was a little rock and roll. And the whole thing of as a vocalist of suddenly singing was dangerous, and we could not assemble, and all the frustrations technically, and all of that shaped what I did on this recording. What the gig that I did coming back out of the pandemic was at the Soapbox Gallery with John DiMartino on piano and Sarah Coswell on violin. And it was that sound that really informed the music choices for the entire album, even though there are I brought in my rhythm section for some, as well as the trio stuff. And what I'm working on now is I just did the release at the Soapbox Gallery. I think the live stream will be available for another couple of days before it drops. But I just got booked at Mesro, which means another set with John and Sarah. So that means more music, which is kind of exciting. So I am kind of focusing on more music that will fit that piano violin sound that I have. And it has been a wonderful experience working with Sarah. Violin is, I always thought of violin as a vocal instrument, but Regina Carter has reminded me that violinists do not have to breathe. So it isn't necessarily a vocal instrument, but it's still, it still sings to me, and it adds something to what I bring to a song as a singer. So yeah, so I think that's really all I can say right now. Coming back as a live performer into these new times has been a real experience. I just did a gig with a big band that for a library, and the place was packed. People, I applaud all of the venues that have done live stream. I've been a big fan of live stream because of being in well, no, they don't. Violinists don't breathe, even though they have a vibrato like a singer. But no, Regina Carter was right. Um, but where was I? What am I doing? Oh, coming back. Um, I think that the hybrid performance is here to stay. I think it is a great thing, both live stream and live performance. It took some time to get used to performing to be the size of the postage stamp on a computer screen or an iPhone rather than larger than life. But there are still, you are still able to reach more people out of your local area by doing live stream performances. So I'm interested in non-traditional, or as Gail would say, alternative venue choices. So I think it is continue to explore it, whether, we are I don't know if we're out of the pandemic yet, but we are definitely in a new chapter. Um, I hope this has made sense. I hope you go to my website and take a listen to the new one. I hope you go enjoy my radio show on Sundays on Sunday afternoons at 3 o'clock, WFDU.FM on the HD2 channel. And it is now currently being repeated on Tuesdays at noon, which is very exciting for me. And yeah, I want to thank Gail very, very much for inviting me to take part. And I hope that you all enjoy Women's History Month. Go listen to some women-penned jazz and support the artists. Go to their websites and live streams and band camps and buy their music. Support them so they can do what they do best: comfort, distract, inspire, provoke. That is my story, and I am sticking to it. Thanks, Gail.